Hey guys, welcome back to AP Econ. Ackley here. It's Wednesday, the 28th. Wednesday the 28th. I'm still in Fresno. Apologize. Again, this should be one of our last video lectures. So kind of a busy day, obviously with the block day. I have a few things to go over with you. Kind of a lot of practice as well, and then also want to give you a heads up because I think this is the last day we will be together. Like this until after vacation. And so I just want to put this out there. You guys have module 33 for over vacation to do. Module 33 for during vacation. So make sure you do that, module 33. Before we get started, you guys should have taken quiz 11 yesterday. That's this one right here. Okay, so we're going to review those results right now. And if you have not taken the quiz yet, get out. Take the quiz and get out and go outside. So let me go ahead and share that screen real quick. Click in here. Here are the answers for the first page. We got 2 points a pop. You have E. Clear that up for you. Money is neutral in the long run. And then C, 3, the aggregate price level. And then A, decrease, increase. 2 points a pop. And then you have for the next page, E and B. Again, 2 points a pop. So you should be totaling a 10 out of 10 something, hopefully by now. And then the last portion is assuming the central bank increases the quantity of money by 25%, even though the economy is initially in both short run and long run macro EQ. Describe the effects in the short run and long run, giving numbers where possible only the following: aggregate output, price level, real value of money supply, purchasing power for goods, and then the interest rate. So this is an 8-point section. So it's an 18-point quiz, kind of a steep one. This is how it should be drawn. You did not have to draw it, but here it is showing an increase in the money supply. Interest rates increase in the short run, and we see so interest rates increase, and then that leads to expansionary policy over here. AD shifts to the right, so we see inflation right here. We see an increase in the overall real GDP right here. And as time goes on, in the long run, we see aggregate supply shift back, nominal wages causing that to happen, drives up the price level, which causes us to need more money to live, increasing money demand, which drives interest rates back up, which brings real GDP this way. So we know in the long run, there is only a change in the price level. So you did not draw it, but here we go. Aggregate output in the short run, increase. Aggregate output in the long run, back to our potential. Or you could have said no change. I'll accept that. So there's 2 points. And then the next one, part B, what was the change in aggregate price level? Short run, you should have seen an increase. Long run, another increase. And it wanted to, if you could put 25% at each time, it's 25% the change in interest rates, or the change in the money supply. And then part C, real value of the money supply. Part 1. Hey, thanks. Appreciate that. Part 1 here says increase in the short run because of the surge in the money supply. However, the effect in the long run will be, there'll be no change, as we know, real value of the money supply, because prices will have risen, inflation, thereby neutralizing the impact of the increase in the money supply. And then finally, interest rates, as you can imagine, dropped in the short run and then increased in the long run due to the increase in money demand. Okay, so go ahead and score that out of 18. Pause the video while you do that, whoever the sub is, so that they have a minute. And then we're going to get started with the lecture, which you actually do not have to take any notes on today, per se. You did not have EXE on this, so let's go ahead and jump into that. So this lecture, I'll stop this share for a minute. This lecture, no, Hold on. All right. This lecture here. All right. So this is policy effects in the short run and the long run, both of aggregate supply and aggregate demand. Again, we've covered a lot of this in Module 4. You guys just were kind of there. So Module 5, or excuse me, Unit 4. So Unit 5 should be, this section, Unit 5, should be pretty good for you. The first half of it, what we've covered in fiscal and monetary policy is nothing new to you. And now we're going to look at just the combined effect, short run, long run of all that stuff, and also look at aggregate supply. As we get into Module 33, especially Module 34, that's some new stuff, stuff you haven't seen yet. So make sure as you kind of go through break on Mod 33 that you can take advantage. That's talking about inflation and different types of inflation. And when we get back, we'll do Mod 34, which is kind of the beast of Unit 5. It's kind of one of the big new things. So let's jump in. Here we go. This is an AP exam alert. As you can imagine, I've said before, this is a huge chunk of the AP test. Stabilization policies, fiscal policy, monetary policy, both affecting the aggregate demand curve. Okay, the government and the Fed, through their policies, fiscal and monetary, do not affect aggregate supply. They affect AD. The government can do things policy-wise that affects AS, but it's not through fiscal policy. It is not fiscal. So supply-side policies and long-run effects makes up about 30 to 40% of the AP exam. And it's been on the test since 2006, basically the first free response question. It's shown up on a pretty good portion of the test. So it'll be very important to practice these scenarios. Again, we've practiced them so much, so I'll draw some things today and probably ask you to stop and pause and practice some things, but you guys are pretty adept here. Have been doing this for a while. So the policy breakdown, again, this is not new. Demand side policies, these are policies that affect the aggregate demand curve. Supply side, as you would imagine, affect the aggregate supply curve. So AD only is affected by fiscal policy, government action through taxes and government spending, those two options. Monetary policy also affects the AD curve. Open market operations, buying and selling of government securities, bonds, and reserve requirement, and the discount rate or interest rates. So those over here, this is the only chunk that affects AD. This fiscal and monetary policy affects AD. That doesn't mean that there are not policies in place that help supply or affect supply as well. So here it is, the short run curve, and we looked at these shifters of supply a long time ago. Changes in input costs, changes in wages, changes in productivity, anything that makes supply easier or more difficult is going to affect our overall level of supply. And then long run curve policies increasing overall potential. As we know, more available resources, higher quality of resources, technology advancement. So it'd be like a larger or a more quality workforce. If we had a population boom or we had better education and training for people, this would ideally shift our aggregate supply to the right. Okay, so the goals of monetary and fiscal policy, as we've said, okay, there they are, both right there. Economic growth, employment, full employment, and stable prices. We've hit this numerous times. These goals, policies achieve goals by shifting aggregate demand, as you see. However, there are policies, as I said, that shift aggregate supply. It just happens in a more natural way, like a more roundabout way, like I've explained before. So, and as you can see in this last graph, AD is shifting here, okay, through monetary and fiscal policy. But yes, aggregate supply can be affected by other things. So what does affect the aggregate supply curve? Okay, things like changes in determinant of any determinant, right? And we've looked at these. This is, again, there's going to be some redundancies in this lecture on purpose. Change in commodity input prices, right? Changes in nominal wages. That's the big one, right? That's the one because wages, workers, labor is the most malleable of the factors of production. When we are either overproducing or underproducing, wages change based on that. Also the productivity of workers, okay? Or it leads to long-run economic growth, which here are the factors that affect that. Increase in available resources, higher quality of resources or quantity of resources, technological advances, And so again, similar stuff you saw in the last slide as well. These will affect the overall macroeconomy on the supply side. And these are linked, as you remember. Okay, I think it shows it there. These two are linked. So these two are the same curve, just in the short run and in the long run. Again, should not be new stuff for you right now. So graphing exercise on your notes, if you have them out, or on the whiteboards. Why don't you pause the video right now if you haven't had anything out taking notes yet, or get out a whiteboard and to practice this. So pause the video now and be prepared. The next bit of this is some interactive stuff. All right, what I'd like you to do first is draw a macro model, ASAD model graph in, let's start in macro equilibrium, outer potential. And then I would like you to show a rightward shift of the aggregate supply curve. Okay, so pause the video if you need to. I'm going to continue. Go ahead and pause when necessary. Once that's done, label the resulting increase in real GDP, as you can imagine, and the decrease in the price level. Your graph should look like this one. Okay, so we see a decline in the price level, an increase in real GDP, and we are now in overdrive, an inflated economy because of aggregate supply. Now, this likely, if it's sustainable, this long run potential line will catch up and it will be over here. If it's not sustainable, we know that aggregate demand can be manipulated by our two institutions of government and the Fed to bring us back, or this aggregate supply curve, as time goes on, nominal wages will rise because of the overdrive and we will shift back. So policies that might lead to this, again, anything that lowers cost of production will shift aggregate supply to the right. Anything that might make production easier, anything that enhances production as a process will all shift aggregate supply to the right. Short run or long run, okay? Long run just has to be sustainable, as we know. So again, there are the determinants that we just looked at. Again, redundant, okay? And again, these two, as I said before, they're the same curve, so be mindful of that. They go together in terms of the factors that generally have an impact on aggregate supply. It is just a curve in a same curve, different time, short run, long run. So here's an example. Effects of beneficial supply shock, like we saw back on this last slide. What would be the effects of that? Well, given an AD curve, a beneficial supply shock that has lasting effects, such as a breakthrough in technology, it won't just be this. Like I said, if it's sustainable, like a breakthrough in technology, then we will actually see the long run curve catch up. And this will be our new potential, which is the best possible scenario. It says will permanently shift both the short run and the long run curve. A beneficial supply shock lowers the price level, as you see, lowers the price level because aggregate supply is shifted to the right. And then long run potential catches up. A temporary beneficial supply shock, usually favorable growing season, for example, with an unusually favorable growing season, will shift the AS curve only temporarily. If the next growing season, for example, is not good, it will shift back. So something like technology, which is typically sustainable, that'll move this. But if it's something just like, hey, we did good for a little while, AS will shift to the right, and then it shifts back if we're back to where we were, if the growing season returns to normal, for example. So continued practice. Assume the economy now starts in equilibrium. So go ahead and pause the video again, and please go ahead and set up a macro economy at equilibrium. Pause now. And I'm going to have you then do some scenarios here. Let's see here. Okay, so just hold on that. On your equilibrium. We'll come back to it in a few minutes. And so a lot of this is examples you guys have done time and time again. I'm going to have you kind of pick the policy. I'd like you to do this one with me now, though. Here it is. So you can draw this too if you want. Here's our liquidity preference model, if you remember. You can draw it if you want, but basically we're looking at aggregate supply effects here. Okay. So if we see the Fed increases the money supply, we see, aggregate demand example. We see an increase in aggregate demand. Here it is. So you're just drawing as we go along. The increase in the money supply decreases interest rates, as we see here. Okay, increased money supply, decrease interest rates. This is all short run because money is cheap now. We see an increase in investment and interest-sensitive consumption, buying homes, cars, etc. So we have an increase in aggregate demand. Also, as you know, we see an increase in savings because people are saving more as well to offset the increase in spending that's going to happen by investment spending businesses because of lower interest rates. This is depicted through an increase in aggregate demand. Again, very redundant, which leads to an increase in both the equilibrium level of output and price level. So now we are here as the price level has gone up. We have seen an increase in real GDP. This is new short-run equilibrium. Okay, a level of level of GDP that's above full employment level of output. This is not sustainable, right here. This is not sustainable. And so what we're going to see as time goes on, right? Nominal wages will rise, which is going to decrease aggregate supply. That again, just as a repeat, nominal wages will rise because we are now overproducing, and to deal with producing at that level, workers are going to demand higher wages. Right, as it says there, the higher wages leads to a decrease in aggregate supply. We reach a new long-run point of equilibrium, or original long-run point of equilibrium. Prices go up, real GDP shifts back. It's unaffected, as you know, in the long run, and we know interest rates will be unaffected because prices went up. We now demand more money to live. It's not drawn here, but you have seen the story before. In the end, what really happens? Increase in the money supply to real GDP. What's the only thing that was affected? And we know that to be the price level. Real GDP unaffected. Interest rates unaffected. Unemployment unaffected. We were doing well with unemployment, and then we came back. So unemployment also unaffected. So now I'll go ahead and draw this one along with the story. Okay. Let's go ahead and I believe, yeah, let's start the economy in long-run macroeconomic equilibrium. We're at our potential. Pause now. Do that on your whiteboard. Okay, now that you've set that up, the federal government, here's the story. Federal government passes a new national minimum wage law. That has nothing to do with government spending, has nothing to do with taxes. So it is not fiscal policy. And we're certainly not talking about the Federal Reserve. So it is not any of the three tools of the Fed. Okay, so it is not AD shifting, it is AS shifting. The increase in wages is going to make production more expensive. This will cause a decrease in the short run shift to the left, right? So go ahead and draw this, an increase in wages. And actually, let's go back here. Go ahead and draw what you think is going to happen. I've already kind of given it away, but it should be, you should be seeing a decrease in aggregate supply. And as we know, so you've paused the video by now. This leads to an increase in wages. This will cause a decrease in short-run supply. This will leave us with a level of real GDP below our potential because we have now shifted away or back from our potential. The economy is below full employment, so we know that we have higher unemployment because it's too expensive to pay workers. We're in a recession, therefore less production overall, right? We also see from the shift in that increase in aggregate price level, all of this causes a recessionary gap, meaning there's not enough AD going on, right? Not enough consumption I, C, G, C plus I plus G plus net exports. All of this sounds like an increase in minimum wage is negative. However, we know many believe the government does this to encourage people to work, thereby increasing aggregate demand, which that may be true, but it discourages employers from hiring them. So there's kind of this cat and mouse game going on. So if the increase in minimum wage does have a negative impact on aggregate supply, the government may have to implement expansionary policy, or the Fed may have to implement expansionary policy. Okay, it can be done, like I said, through fiscal or monetary, depending on the institution, lowering taxes or increasing government spending for fiscal, or changing the money supply through the three Fed tools, OMOs, required reserve, or interest rates. Will increase aggregate demand, bringing us back to full employment. So you can see if AS shifts and gets us out of whack, the government can do something, or the Fed can do something to manipulate AD. If they don't and they leave it alone, aggregate supply will then come back to where it was. It'll just shift one way and it'll shift back the other way. So did the increase in wages affect real GDP in the long run? And we say not in the long run. Okay, unaffected. There it is. And I believe that's going to be it Just as a repeat, here are all of our potential shifters. Okay, and you're welcome to take a quick snapshot of that. It's on Google Classroom as well. But just to remember, AD is affected by fiscal policy and monetary policy. Anything else is going to shift aggregate supply, and we've talked about those, primarily wages. Okay, so what I would like to do now, I'm going to stop that share. Hello again. I would like to have you take a look at activity 5.5, and I'm going to, we've done this before, I'm going to give you the activity to do each page. And then I'm going to show you the key. So please don't sit idly by and do nothing, but please make sure you are working out these problems. Okay, so we have this first page right here. I'm going to share this screen with you guys. Okay, there it is. Monetary and fiscal policy interactions. So what I'd like you to do, like you to take a look at this chunk right here. And, oh, sorry, you need to see the scenario. There you go. So it says here, the unemployment rate is at 10% and the inflation rate is 2%. The federal government cuts personal income taxes and increases spending. The Federal Reserve buys bonds on the open market. So I'd like you to do, the unemployment rate is at 10%. So and inflation is at 2%. So we are not doing real well right now. I would like you to go ahead and show what is happening with all of these three graphs. Go ahead. You have your macro model. You have your your liquidity preference model. And you have your loanable funds model, and then go ahead and circle whatever's happening here and explain over here for each of these. What's happening with real GDP, price level, unemployment, interest rates, and investment spending. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video now. Okay, now that you're back, here are the answers to that scenario. Try to slide that up so you can see what's going on. Zoom out a little bit there. Try to, oh, that was blurry. There you go. If you need to move closer, I'm moving closer too. That's generally what happened. Okay, pause that, check your answers. And now that you've done that, let's go ahead and check out the second page. The second scenario, it looks like this, okay? And it talks about the unemployment rate is at 6% and inflation, so you want to take a look up here, inflation is at 9%, the federal government raises personal income taxes and cuts spending, the Fed sells bonds on the open market. So take a minute, pause the video, and work through that scenario, draw everything out. Now that you've done that, here are the solutions, the answers to that section right there. Zoom it out again. Oh, zoom it out. Oh, that might just be too much. Let me zoom in, and you can pause and take a look. Take a look at that. And then I'll slide it up for you and take a look at that. Pause the video again if you need to. Okay, the last page, here it is. Last scenario. Scenario 3. Here it is, says unemployment rate is 6%. The inflation rate is 5%. Government cuts personal income taxes. Again, you're working out all these scenarios. what is happening with real GDP, the price level, unemployment, interest rates, and investment spending, and explain. So go ahead and pause the video for a minute and work out that scenario right there. Okay, now that you've done that, here are the final answers for that. Right here. Nope, that's not right. Right here, sorry. Some of these are question marks because we don't know the effect, because you have, the reason why is we're having some policies work counter. So you may have expansionary by fiscal and contractionary by monetary, or vice versa. So we don't know when it says here, for example, we don't know the effect. That is, we don't know, was it fiscal or monetary? So we had expansionary fiscal policy, but contractionary monetary policy in this one. We don't know which one had a greater impact on the economy, okay? So as we slide up here, taking a look at D, C, D, and E. There you go. Okay, stop that share. Hopefully that worked for you guys. Please make sure you're sharp in working through all these scenarios. Again, a lot of it redundant, but it's going to be good, healthy work for you guys going into the AP practice and the exams. Hope everything is well. Don't forget about Module 33 over break. I'll try to send out a reminder, and that's it. Happy Easter.